Hello and welcome to Coffee with Jenny B. It's conversations over coffee. It's about community, connections, what brings me joy, and everything in between. I'm your host, Jenny Sakovac. Did you ever wonder why you do certain things? Or why you act a certain way? Or even what your beliefs are about yourself, other people, and perhaps the world? Well, it all comes down to a belief, a program, a system, whatever you want to call it, called the Enneagram. Now, I first dived into the option of learning about the Enneagram probably about 20 years ago. And it's interesting because it really does help you understand a lot about yourself. So for instance, on the scale between 1 and 9, I'm a 2. And what that means is the 2 is a helper. That means that you go out of your way to help others. In fact, you put others first before yourself, because that's just because you want to help and it comes from the heart. But what's interesting about being a 2 is that when you're a healthy 2, you're looking after yourself. But when you're an unhealthy 2, you go opposite. And so when you put up and put up and put up, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's not pretty. And so it really helps to understand what your number is, but also understanding how it can affect you in a healthy way and an unhealthy way. My guest today is an expert on the Enneagram. In fact, her business is called Enneagram Aware. Her name is Tam Craker. She used to teach music in elementary school, and now she is a coach and consultant for her business. And she's going to tell us everything we need to know, well, maybe not everything, about the Enneagram. Please help me welcome Tam. Hey.
Hi, that was such a great intro, Jenny. I loved hearing your explanation of a 2. You nailed it.
Absolutely.
You totally got it. I love that.
Thank you for being here. I was so excited to have you on my program because I really love everything about the Enneagram.
Me too.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So for those that may not understand what Enneagram is, tell us, I guess briefly or in a nutshell, what exactly is the Enneagram?
Sure. So the Enneagram is, on its very basic level, a personality system. So it is a way of noticing things, just like you said, noticing things about yourself and then having empathy and noticing things about other people. So it is similar in some ways to some of the other personality tests that are out there. You can look at behavior, you can look at some of those traits, but what I love about the Enneagram, so first of all, for anyone who hasn't heard about it, the Enneagram is 2 words, drawing of 9. It's a Greek word meaning drawing of 9. Mm-hmm. So there are 9 personality tests, personality types, just like you said in your intro.
Yes.
So what I love about the Enneagram is there is an aspect where you can kind of look at behaviors and they can be clues, but sometimes we notice that people have similar behaviors, but they're doing their behaviors for different reasons. And so what the Enneagram really captures is what's beneath some of those reasons. So when you talk about a 2 and you talk about helping, lots of people help. 2s are helping exactly for the reason you said. It's from the heart and they're looking for a connection.
Yes.
When I help people, it isn't the same reason.
No.
It isn't the same reason. So when we can look at things just as behavior, sometimes that leads to misunderstandings, right? Because you're assuming that someone's behavior is just what you're seeing based on what you know about your own behavior, and there's something underneath it. There's something below it that's going on. And that's what I love about the Enneagram.
It's interesting you bring up a good point about that, because you said you like to help people, but not quite the same way. So I'm going to, because we didn't talk about this before our interview, I'm going to guess that you're probably a 3.
Ooh, that's an interesting guess. I'm actually a 9, but I'm connected to 3.
Ah.
Yeah.
And the reason I mentioned the 3 is because with the 2, so when you think about the circle, and then you have the numbers all around, and as you say, there's that connection.
Yes.
So there's that connection. So for when I want to be a healthy 2, I'm connected to 4. right?
Yes.
So 4, when you think about 4 and you think about animals, for instance, okay? So you think about the swan, right? The swan is beautiful, gliding.
Yeah.
You think about a 4 as someone like an actor, you know, someone who really thinks more about themselves. But when you think about a 4, you think, well, you know, they're being just really selfish. However, when you look at it in a healthy way, if I go to 4, that means instead of, if you say to me, hey, Jenny, I have a garage sale on Saturday, do you want to help me? And let's say I had a whole day planned. Typically what I would have done in the past, I would have said, I would have canceled everything. It's like, no problem, I'll come and help you. And then thinking, well, I just canceled all these things that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Or if I look after myself, I might say, you know what, I'd love to help you, Tam, but you know what, I've got all these things booked.
Yeah.
Let me know next time and I'll come and help you.
So, exactly. Well, and you're explaining exactly the perfect move for a healthy 2 is it's the old phrase, put on your oxygen mask first.
Right.
4s are really good at going internal and analyzing their own emotions, and 2s forget about their emotions because they're fixated on other people's emotions and solving everybody else's.
Yes.
That's such a good explanation.
Well, and the other thing about 2, so when I mentioned about exploding when I'm unhealthy, is let's say I'm helping you, and it's not that, so for me, when I'm helping people, I don't expect anything in return. You know, a simple thank you, you know, is great. But if I'm helping someone and they're taking it for granted, it's like, oh yeah, Jenny's going to help. I'll just call her up. She'll do whatever.
Yes.
They're assuming I'm going to help.
Yeah.
And then rather than appreciating, again, I'm not doing it looking for that appreciation. Don't give me a pat on the back.
Yeah.
But just some acknowledgement. You know, thank you. Even a simple thank you. When I don't get that, I go to 8. 8 is, that's baloney. You can't tell me I'm an 8, right? Very unhealthy.
Absolutely. And you're bringing up such a good point, because I think a lot of people, the most common question I get is, am I born my number and does it stay that way? And you are pointing out the fact that yes, you're born your number, but then within the Enneagram system, there's things called wings, which are the numbers on either side of you. And then there's these internal lines that connect you to other numbers around the circle. So your number doesn't just stay 2 forever. It morphs as your life moves on. If you were a 2 and a 2 was sitting right beside you, you would look different. Right? There's so many ways that this system embraces human life. It embraces the fact that we have stressful days and we have healthy days. It embraces all those pieces, and not only embraces it, gives you a bit of a map. Like, it shows you, like, just like you said, when I'm really healthy, I notice that I'm more in touch with my own emotions. When I'm not healthy, I'm flying off the handle over at the 8 zone. So it tells you exactly what's going on. You know, I love that.
And it's interesting because my barometer, if you will, in terms of if I'm being healthy is if I haven't had a bubble bath this week, there's a problem.
I was just doing a workshop about this last night, and one of the things I always say to 2s is, learn self-care. Learn self-care. And it is an overused phrase for other people, but for those of us, me included as a 9, who spend a lot of their time thinking about what other people are thinking about, you really need to develop some type of self-care routine that reminds you that you come first. You have to get that in place.
Okay, absolutely. Now, I want to actually get you to talk about the descriptor for each one. So we know that a 2 is a helper. A 9, because my son is a 9.
Okay.
And I would say they're the peacekeeper sort of thing. So start with 1 and tell us what each one is. Sure.
So a lot of different people have put titles to each of them, like the helper, the peacekeeper, all those things. I just want to make mention that those are man-made words. So for some people they fit, and that really helps them identify who they are. But the system itself was designed by numbers so that it was neutral. No number is better. You know, sometimes we get socialized with certain words mean different things for us. So I don't really identify as a peacekeeper because it was so normal for me to keep the peace that I don't think of myself as that way.
You don't need a title. No.
I don't need a title, first of all, but I also don't even recognize it about myself because internally I don't feel peaceful. So all of those things that I'm doing to keep the peace are to keep the peace externally, and internally I'm working overtime to make those happen.
Okay.
So I'll throw out some titles and some ideas around that, but I want people to know that it is totally up to you whether those words fit or whether they don't. And sometimes an exploration of why they don't fit is really helpful. Why does the peacekeeper not fit for you? Why does the helper rub you the wrong way?
Right.
So looking into those pieces is actually a huge self-awareness path for you.
Okay.
So let's do this.
All right.
Okay. Enneagram 1s are often known as perfectionists.
Yes.
And it is not that they think that everything's perfect, but it's often that they can see what is not perfect. So they are born into this world with this beautiful sense of completeness. Like when a tree grows this way, it's perfect the way that it is.
Right.
But when ones notice that maybe other people aren't doing things to their best, or maybe things fall short in their own life, that's when those perfectionist tendencies start to come out.
Right.
So they're often known as a perfectionist, but it's obviously much deeper than that.
And that's my husband.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, and they really walk a fine line between, they are so good at what they do in a lot of ways, and they have a follow through, and they're really responsible, and that's such a beautiful trait for ones. And then when you're talking about going unhealthy, then it becomes rigid, and it has to be this way.
Yep.
So ones really need to find the balance between those two spaces.
Okay. So ones go to 5, correct?
Ones go to 7 and to 4, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
4 has 2 numbers going out from it, 2s and 1s.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I know there's lots of theories around arrows being one way for healthy and one way for stress. You can actually access both arrows by, if you're, feeling stressed in your own number, it's almost like an escape route, if you can see it that way. Or you can do it very intentionally. There's actually a very intentional way that 2s can go to 8 and become really healthy and confident and direct and say, this is exactly what I want and what I need.
Which is what I've done occasionally.
Ah.
When you're pushed to the limit,
Yes.
it's like, you know what?
Boundaries.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm not taking this anymore, and I'm
Totally.
going to take charge. I want to touch on number 1 for a second.
Sure.
Because initially I thought my husband was an 8, and someone pointed out, no, he's a 1. And the ones with the finger, it's the pointing. But you know what's interesting about a 1, and I don't know about other ones, but my husband is a 1. He has his routine. When he goes shopping, he follows the same routine. It's like, don't touch my stuff. Don't touch my stuff. Don't move my stuff. You're doing that wrong. You're doing that wrong. But then he'll leave his socks everywhere, his
Yes.
coffee cups everywhere.
Yes.
But when it comes to his thing, it's like,
Yes.
oh my gosh.
And you know what, that brings up another point is, we won't have time to get into this, but it's amazing to explore Enneagram subtypes. So for every number, there's actually 3 subtypes of the number. And sometimes that is explained in the subtype, where ones really want control over a very specific sphere of their life. And then other spheres of their life, first of all, we just don't have the energy to be in charge of every single sphere of our life. It's just overwhelming.
Right.
So sometimes that makes sense within the subtype categories, that certain things need to be very one-ish, and other things end up being kind of left to the wayside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got 1 and 2.
Okay.
Let's go to 3.
So 3 is called, sometimes they're called the achiever or the performer. They are the ones that really want to create things of value. They want to be seen as people who do things and bring value to other people. So they're born with this belief that who we are, just as we are, is perfect, just as we are. They're born with the idea that if I do nothing in my life but breathe, I'm worthy of love.
Oh,
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, I love that.
And then when they are starting to experience maybe a parent who wants them to perform for something, or they feel like maybe they're not getting the love that they really want and there's a disconnection, that's when those performance pieces start.
Okay.
So that's when you go, okay, it looks like this isn't working the way I thought it was going to work, where I would be loved unconditionally. So maybe if I do this, then they will. Maybe if I do this, then they will. Maybe if I do this.
Okay.
So it turns into doing or performing, or even in really unhealthy ways, sometimes it is, maybe if I make it seem like I'm really good at this, then people will love me. So it becomes an overdoing of some of those pieces.
So sort of fine line, right?
Yes.
Okay, so 4 is
4 is, sometimes they get called the individualist. They are the ones that are really good at emotions.
okay, yes.
They're really good at experiencing emotions, and they're really good at expressing their emotions, and then that's where their overdoingness happens.
Got it.
So they're born believing that they are unique and individual, like we all are. We
Of
are all
course.
born exactly the way we're supposed to be, exactly different and the same as the people around us.
Okay.
And then when they notice that that is not appreciated, or they notice that maybe it seems like they don't have a place to fit in their families, this deep sadness comes over them. So they are really steeped in sadness. And that informs a lot of how they move through the world.
Okay.
So when they're healthy, they're beautiful sounding boards. So
Yeah.
they are, you can go to a 4 and you can tell them anything, and it's never too dark, and they're the best listeners, and they're in. But when they can't get out of that, they're hard to relate to.
Yeah, because they're into themselves.
Yes. It's really hard to relate to.
Yeah.
So they are, they're very good at emotional intelligence when they're healthy.
Yeah.
They're very in touch with their emotions.
Okay. 5s.
Fives are so interesting. If there is an introvert on the Enneagram, it's probably 5s.
Yeah, they're the ones to leave the party.
Yeah. They're born with this beautiful sense that there is knowledge to be had by everyone, and there is wisdom and intellect and beautiful things to be sought in human life and created. Like, we create some of those pieces as we interact with people.
Yes.
And as it feels like that's not working out the way they thought, they hold on to it for themselves. So then they go, okay, well, maybe if I learn all the things that I can learn, then I will accomplish that ultimate knowing that I thought existed.
Yes.
So they're often very smart in very specific areas. They dive deep into a very specific area. Or actually, a friend of mine dives deep into like 3 or 4 specific areas, to the point where she probably has a doctorate level information on a million things. It's wild.
It is.
Do you have 5s in your life?
I used to work with a 5.
Okay.
And so for me, the 5s know all the scientific names for plants, right? They're the ones that will leave the party, and it's like, hey, what happened to Joe?
Yes. Yeah.
Joe's gone.
They definitely have limits on what their limits are on a variety of things. It can be on their time, their energy, their stuff, their knowledge. But they definitely, if they don't want to be there, they just leave. Like, and for a 2, that would be a difficult interaction, because 2s are connection based.
Yeah, and 5s are like,
aren't. That's something they need to grow into. 2s need to ease off on the connection sometimes, and 5s need to warm up to it.
yeah. And we'll get to that in a second about that. Okay, so 6s.
Okay, 6s. So 6s are the ones that are known for worst case scenario thinking, but if you asked a 6 that, they wouldn't necessarily think they're worst case scenario thinker. But they're planners and over planners. So they are thinking about all the things that could possibly go wrong. They're thinking about all the things that could go right. They're asking questions, lots and lots of questions. So they're quite intellectual, but sometimes they get stuck there.
Right.
So then they sometimes seem like they're mulling and they're mulling and they're mulling and they're mulling, and they never do.
Yeah.
So their path forward is to do.
Yes.
To get decisions made.
Well, and it's interesting because I also used to work with a 6.
Okay.
And when you think about scales, right, it's like, it could be this, could be that. And you're right. If it's hard to make a decision, but when they're in their strength, it's like, okay, this is the path that I'm choosing.
Totally.
And maybe it's all the research that they've done to get to that point. And so for me, it's like, okay, I'll flip a coin. For them, it's like, oh no.
No, I got to know what's going to happen with this. Like, their pros and cons list. It's not even a pros and cons list, because I've seen them. They have like a million.
I know.
Pro lists and con lists happening, and they're all connected somehow. It's wild.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
6s are funny. They can think of everything.
And 7s are actually fun.
7s are fun.
Yes.
They're known for fun. They are the FOMO. They are the why feel bad if you can feel good kind of people.
Yeah.
So they're born knowing that we are designed for pleasure and joy and happiness. And the problem with them is that they're worried that when that fun ends, something sad will happen.
Right.
And so they're trying to stay ahead of that.
Well, and they're always going for the next best thing.
Yes.
So I had a boss who was a 7.
Mm-hmm.
So 7s are like, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's do this. And then they leave, and then the 2s and the 3s do the work. Right?
Yes. Well, I have a cousin. This is the example I always use. If she's coming to a function, she's already been at a function, and she's leaving early to go to the next function because there's just too many fun things. She has to do all the fun things.
I know.
Yes, that's a great example of a 7.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, So eights?
Eights are often called the challenger. The word I like to put with eights, because it bothers them a little bit, is I put the word power.
Yeah.
So I have a P word to represent each number, and I like the word power because almost every eight that I have taught now comes up to me and goes, I don't like that word.
Yep.
Because they know who has the power.
Right.
So it's not a good or bad word. It is meant to explain the fact that eights are very aware of who's in charge. They often get assumed that they should be in charge. And I know I have a lot of eight clients because they are bosses of big organizations. And eights do not want to be in charge. But there's something about, I shouldn't say they don't want to be in charge. They don't always have to be in charge.
But they feel that they should be.
They do if it's not going the way that they think it should go.
And then they step in.
Yes.
I can see ones and eights clashing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, eights are really direct, and they are the first ones to speak up if something is going badly for someone. Like they will alleviate any issue for anybody. They're really advocates for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't realize how much space they're taking up. And so sometimes when they can't see how much energy they're taking up in a room, then they go, how come no one's contributing? It's like, well, they don't feel like they can contribute. So it needs to be that balance of, I need to trust that people in the room can also do their jobs,
right,
so that we can do this in collaboration.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I want to touch, you mentioned the word wings.
Yes.
And so there's wings. So beside every number is another number. So for instance, for me as a 2, one of my wings is 1 and the other is 3. So, and before we actually get to wings, there's the head, the heart, and the gut, right?
I love that. Yeah.
So the heart, let's start with the head. So the head is 7, 8, 9.
5, 6, 7.
Oh, sorry, 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
And then 8, 9, and 1.
Our
the
gut,
right?
Yep.
And then 2, 3, 4, of course, heart.
Yes.
Yes. So I have 1 as the perfectionist, and I'm going to use that label there. And I have 3 as the achiever, which makes sense for me because I would like to be perfect in certain ways. I like to give from the heart, so the 2, I like to help. And then the 3, I like to achieve, meaning I don't necessarily always want that those accolades or that attention, but I have goals that I want to achieve, and so I'm going to pursue that.
Success-oriented.
Success, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you think about the wings, they, even though you're, and when you talk about that, each of us has a little bit of maybe all the numbers in a sense, but we really think about one that is more the one that we connect with, I suppose.
Yeah, so the theory is that as humans, we're all connected. That's why the Enneagram's a circle. The Enneagram's a circle to represent the fact that we are all connected. The trouble is that our lifetime is only so long.
Yep.
So the work of the Enneagram, as you go into the layers and layers and layers and layers, don't worry about the other numbers. Focus on your number and figure out what's going on with you, because the other numbers, incorporating some of those characteristics is great, but there is plenty for us to do at our core number. So the theory is that you identify your core number, and yes, you may identify with different numbers throughout your life depending on what's going on, but ultimately there is a core number that kind of leads you through your life. And then the wings, I love the term growth stretch.
Oh,
so they're
I like that
a way to kind of incorporate on a not as intense way parts into your personality that give you balance, that kind of help you see other people in a different way, and kind of round out your own personality. So for 2s, sometimes 2s get so stuck in connection. 1s are actually a place where they go, well, I have a job to do. I have a task to do, so I can't just sit here with you and your feelings and help you with that. I need to actually just follow through with my job. Right? And then you did a great job explaining the 3 space, right? 2s don't need to just help others. They can help themselves, and they can achieve success for themselves. So it's a perfect way to blend into what's already going on for 2s.
I love that. I love that. Now, you mentioned about understanding your number, and I know for myself, I've gone, like, there's a number of different quizzes and tests, and there's books galore, and I've done a few of those myself. So what would you recommend to someone who maybe isn't aware of the Enneagram and wants to know, who am I on the circle? So how could they do that?
Thank you for that question. So I really don't think there is a wrong way to find your Enneagram number. I think there are more and less accurate ways probably to go about it. I found the Enneagram by reading a book. Okay. I found a book. Mm-hmm. It had a list of 20 things that said, if you are this number, you might be, you might think this. And I read they started with 8. I read 8 and I was like, not me. Read 9, that's me. And then unfortunately I am a 9, so I saw myself in every single number after that.
Of course.
But that brought me back to 9.
Okay.
So reading a book, getting a book out of the library, reading a book, or finding stuff online. Mm-hmm. I mean, even on my website, I've got some of those statements where you can say an Enneagram 9 might think.
Yep.
And then there's statements to read. So it is designed to be exploratory in that way. There are also tests to be done online. There are free tests. Mm-hmm. I will caution a little bit on some of the free tests. The number of people that have told me, I'm an 8 wing 5. Well, your wing is the number beside you, and an 8 and a 5 aren't beside each other. So it's impossible that you would be an 8 wing 5. But maybe it's trying to say you're an 8 and you got a lot of 5, but an 8 and a 5 are connected by an arrow. That makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a lot of sense. But we're trying to oversimplify a very complicated system.
Oh my gosh. You're absolutely right, because there's so much that you can do a deep dive.
Yes.
I mean, I talked about, the finger,
Yes.
and one's also like if you see the eyebrow going up
They've
a little bit.
Got a lot of muscle tension.
but every number, and because I, similar to what you did is once I learned the basics, then I wanted to know more.
Absolutely.
So there's the body, there's the facial, the body. There's even animals. I talked about the swan.
Colors. There's all kinds of ways that you can explore it. And so what I did when I found it, I did the book. And then I started realizing that there was a lot of repetition in the book. So I was really not getting to some of the core stuff I wanted to learn about my number. And that's when I started seeking out a coach. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started seeking out podcasts. And I started going on more of that deeper dive. Mm-hmm. So one of the services that I offer is typing interviews, is to sit down one-on-one with me and we'll go through a bunch of questions. And it's like an online test, but you get to give actual answers. Right. So instead of saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about conflict?
Well,
you can actually say, when it's work, I have no problem with it. When it's home, that's another story. When it's kids, that's another story. When it's this. So I like that way of figuring out type, because there's also a way that now I can take your stories and I can show you how they fit into the system. So it becomes a much more personal approach.
I like that.
Yeah.
Have you ever had someone say, maybe they had an idea that they were a certain number, and then when you told them, well, no, actually it's this, that they've been surprised? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the process, what I love the most about the Enneagram is that, yes, there are people like me who've done a lot of studying, but ultimately I have never lived in your body. Right. And so there is no part of my system that says, no, you're this number and you can't say anything about it. I'm not doing this. I'm not the one. I am connected to one a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Yeah. So what I think is really one of the most beautiful parts about the Enneagram is that it is not a system where other people tell you what to do or put you in a box or tell you have to be this way.
Yeah.
So in my professional recommendation, I can say, it appears like you are this number. These are the reasons that I have. And actually, my teachers have taught me to give you 2 numbers, to say, you look like you could be either of these numbers. Here's my reason for this. Here's my reason for this. Now you get to explore. Mm-hmm. Here are a whole bunch of resources, and now you decide what fits for you. Yeah. Because ultimately, true growth doesn't happen because a coach said you have to do it. True growth happens when you embody it.
And believe it for yourself.
Exactly.
You know what's interesting? My daughter's a 2.
Oh, interesting.
And what's interesting about 2s together is you would think because 2s are helpers that they would automatically work together to help. And
I think I know where this is going.
No, it does not work that way. I've had to learn, even at 65, I've had to learn to ask first, would you like some help?
Absolutely.
If the answer is no, then I have to step back.
Yes.
And I've also done, if I step in to do something without, first of all, asking or telling them that I've done that, big trouble.
Absolutely. That is a growth path for twos and for lots of us.
Yeah.
But especially for twos who can often sense what somebody needs.
Oh, yeah.
But the sensing is immediately taking you away from you.
I know.
It's immediately saying, I'm going to figure them out instead of figuring me out.
Yeah.
And it's that you're losing a little bit of yourself in that process.
And you know what? It's not a good feeling.
No.
And not just for twos. I'm going to assume here that for all the numbers, you and even with a 5, like you can't assume just because you've read a description that that's what they are.
No.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. So, why is it important for us to understand what each other's numbers are? So, for instance, if I'm working with someone and I sense that they're a certain way. If I knew, let's say, that they were a 5 and I'm a 2, I would know that, okay, so no lovey-dovey, no hugs and emotions, but I would understand that this is how they feel comfortable if I treat them in this way, and vice versa. You know, so it's understanding. So why is that important, and how can we, if we don't do a deep dive into the Enneagram, how can we identify what someone is in order to be able to work together in a harmonious way?
Well, I love all your questions today. This one's great too. This is part of what I do, to go into organizations and to help them create some empathy for each other. I think that the Enneagram is a tool that can be a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of assumptions that people make about other people based on a description that they've read.
Right.
But it is also a chance for you to explore why it makes you uncomfortable that that person thinks a little bit differently than you do. So I think that that is maybe a sign that this is a powerful tool for relational intelligence and relationships in general. So I think it's really, really important not to assume about people. You can know a lot about somebody and still not know what's going on inside their internal world. But that also is now an opportunity for you to open up a dialogue about that. And I think the Enneagram is a perfect pathway forward for some of that dialogue. Just like you're saying, I have a 5 that's in my life. When a 5 can say, I don't want hugs. And that isn't taken poorly, that isn't whatever, that is just understood. That now we both know that. That is now in an open space where we both have that knowledge and we both have that understanding. You get it, they get it, everybody gets it, and we can kind of move forward without some of those misunderstandings. So the Enneagram is a great way to open up those conversations about the fact that we both came here for coffee, but we came here for coffee for different reasons.
Absolutely, yes.
Which I love.
I love that too. You know, it's funny. I have a girlfriend who's a 3, and she really embodies the 3, but in a good way. Like, there's nothing negative about it. That is who she is. And I'm using that as an example because then when you understand and realize that is who she is, then you can support what she's doing, celebrate what she's doing, and whatever she needs in order for her to continue down that path.
Absolutely.
Right? And the same thing's for 2. So if I'm working with someone and someone knows that I'm a 2, they understand that I'm helping because I want to
connect.
Do something, connect. I want to connect with you.
Absolutely.
But I also want it to be reciprocal. You know, so if I don't get that reciprocal back, then I feel that I'm being used.
Disconnected.
Disconnected, and it's not a good
Absolutely.
feeling at all.
Well, we didn't dive into the 2's essential quality, but they're born knowing what beautiful connection looks like, and it is reciprocal. And so when 2's don't feel like they're getting that, then they try and manufacture it. Maybe if I say the right thing, they'll do that for me. Maybe if I do the right thing, they'll do that for me. So they're trying to manufacture what they know to be a beautiful and natural back and forth between humans,
which then causes the frustration and I mean all of us, and that's when you go to that stress number because you're frustrated with what's not happening here. And so and I want to say automatically, unless you understand that this can be a stressor for you. So if you understand that, you know, if I don't look after myself, I'm going to go here. So then it's like, okay, well, I need to make sure that I build that into my my routine, my life, that I have, like, let's say, every week I have to have a bubble bath. Every week I have to, or every morning I need 15 minutes to read a book. I need that time for myself. So I can really focus in on me. So then when I'm healthy, I can be healthy for everyone.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's my favorite part about the Enneagram. Once you find your number, it just opens up this world of tricks. Tricks to figure yourself out. Tricks to be like, ooh, I did that again. I bet I'm stressed out. Right? Because a lot of us even struggle to notice when we're stressed out before it's too late. And the Enneagram is full of that information, right? It is full of information that can say, hey, that seems like a danger zone for you. You got to sort some of that out, or you're going to start harming people more than you realize.
Or harming yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. That's a great point.
Oh my gosh, it is. It gets back to understanding. So again, if I know that you're a 9 and I know what some of your stressors are, so if I notice and it's like, hey Tam, I noticed that you're, da, maybe you want to take a break, whatever it is. And then it's like, oh yeah, because sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing. And it's like it's almost like you're on the brink of it's being like dangerous in a sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's again, I keep using the word double-edged sword, but that is what's tricky about relationships in general. And at least the Enneagram can give us a little bit of language to help us explore some of those really tough moments, right? Because there will be times where you'll watch your loved ones being stressed out and heading into a danger zone space, but they're not ready to invite you into that. They're not ready to talk about it. They're not ready to embrace a path out of that. It's not time for them to do that, or they're not ready for it. And so at least when you have the lens of the Enneagram to look at that, you can go, okay, I know what's going on. I'm going to support them the way that I can, but ultimately it isn't my job to lift them out of the pit that they're in. They need to still make that choice.
Yes.
So I can care for them to the best that I can, but I also still need to make sure that I'm safe and I'm taken care of in that space too.
And I think it's important to share, especially if you're in a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, work relationship, whatever it is, being honest with the other person. So for instance, if I'm helping you do something, I would just like a simple thank you. Just acknowledge that I've done this. You don't have to send me flowers and cards and oh, I love you because you did so blah blah blah. I don't need any. And in fact, I would almost be like almost too overwhelmed, right?
Right.
But just a simple hey, thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Simple and
absolutely.
And so tell the other person this is what I would like from you.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, that's such a beautiful thing that the Enneagram offers, is to say, first of all, each of us have those traits, right? We all want to be acknowledged, whether we want to say that we do want to or not.
Twos want it.
But twos are going to admit it, right? Or should admit it so that they can create those connections with other people. And that's built into the Enneagram. We know that about twos. We know that about threes, right? That they want acknowledgement for what they're offering to you. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so tell us how we can get in touch with you, how we can book a session with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I work one-on-one, but I also work corporately. So I work one-on-one and I do coaching sessions. So if you already know your Enneagram number, I'm happy to sit down with you and look at some of the things we talked about today, some of the growth paths. I'd love to get into subtypes. That's my favorite. Sometimes it's fun to look at how parents overlay into that. I love that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I do typing interviews, which is learning your type, and then I do follow-up a series of coaching so that we can really dig into what that path looks like for you. And then I also do workshops and team building and culture development within organizations, nonprofits, government, for-profit, everybody. Everybody needs a little Enneagram in their world.
Oh, I love that.
And then my favorite thing to do is to look at the makeup of a team. So to do typing interviews for an entire team and then do some strategy around how balanced is your team. And so that is one of my favorite things to do, because you can start to see, oh, looks like our team really values this because we've hired a whole bunch of body types, for example, or we've hired a whole bunch of heart types, or we don't have any heart types. Maybe that's why our team is not always connecting.
Right.
So you can start really analyzing what your priorities are as an organization, and they may not be what's written down, right? They might be more hidden. So it's fun to get into that kind of stuff too.
And it's important to understand each type. So for instance, if you're, let's say, planning an event and you put a 5 at registration table,
Role alignment. It's perfect for role alignment. Absolutely.
A 5 would be
Absolutely.
like, a 5 belongs in the green room.
Yes.
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 2s and 3s.
Yes.
Yeah.
That same thing happened when I used to teach. We had a secretary that was really friendly, and she was always at the front. And then we had a secretary that no one went to unless they really needed her. And she was at the back. So you always came across the friendly one, and then you moved into the office a little further because it makes sense, right? And when you know and name people's Enneagram numbers, there are some of those things built in.
Yep.
They're built in there. Like you're exactly right. Don't put someone who doesn't want to deal with people at a registration table. Right. Put a 2 there.
Yeah. And don't put a 2 in the green room because Excel spreadsheets, oh my gosh, no way.
No.
It's like a silent death.
Totally. So I think that's such a good point. That's another huge benefit to bringing the Enneagram into your workspace.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Tam, for being
you.
here. I know we just scratched the surface of what the Enneagram is, because there's so much more that we could do a dive into. And that's a reason why someone should then connect with you, whether it's team building, even on a personal level, just to understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I think once you understand what makes you tick, and maybe even, and you don't even have to do a deep dive into it, but if you understand, oh, okay, I had no idea why I was doing this, but it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And if it feels too much to give me a call right off the hop, find me on my website. I have tons of Enneagram information up there, so just read through it and see if you can find your type.
Sounds great. And we'll make sure that we include that information on our socials.
Perfect.
So
I love
wonderful.
that.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was I've learned a lot, even though I knew a little bit, but there's always room for more learning and just to really understand a little bit more about who we are. And when we're speaking to someone who's an expert, it really does give us that little bit of extra.
Thank you. It's been awesome being on here. I love it. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Tam. So this has been Coffee with Jenny B on the Multicultural channel. I'm your host, Jenny Sakovac.